I'm Ken White. I'm a member of the Thousand Island Association for a whole bunch of years. Been a board member for, I'm not sure how many. And said, sure, I'll handle the Water Levels Committee when Peter Fitton asked me. I didn't know what I was getting in for. I've been consulting for years. I'm an engineer. I don't work this hard for stuff I'm getting paid big bucks for. Anyhow, this is quite a consuming topic, and I have to put myself down still confused. And I've had my head hurt off and on for the last 7-8 weeks, just trying to absorb this. It's so complicated. So let me get started here. We'll talk about the river a little bit, and then we'll go into the technical side of the plan. This is what it looked like in spring 2019. And that's the peak. The peak that we had, let's see, June, looks like June 3rd in 2017. Excuse me, 2019. It kept going up and up and up, and then slowly going down. So, this is what I was faced with at the beginning of June. That's my boat on the dock in Ivy Lee. I'm from the States. I live 3 miles north of the bottom of the entire drainage basin for Lake Ontario. I come up here, I dock in Ivy Lee, and then I come up to the Navy Group, which is halfway between there and here, and I'm at Hambly Island. Anyhow, I have to jump in the boat. I have to carry lots of stuff out and stack it. Fun, huh? So, I'm just going to take you on a quick boat trip to the island. On my right, that's Ivy Island. That's my favorite boathouse to photograph. Right there. Pretty rough shape. And then I go a little farther, and on the left, I think he had to rebuild his garage door opener, because it definitely was way below the levels. And then I go a little farther up to Popham Island. I call it the Yellow Boathouse. That poor thing, I was waiting for it to float away completely. A little bit farther is Rowley Island, which is just the other side of Downey. My Downey friends up here can recognize Rowley. I think they look out on it. And that was completely flooded out. Couldn't get their boats out for quite a while. And just past Rowley, going around towards Stave, I mean, like the 2 islands up, that island, I'm not sure you can really see exactly where the levels are in the back, but there were basically 3 islands there. The building structures, and that island was never built that low. There's a for sale sign on that now. There are for sale signs all over the place. People can't handle it. You know, I get much older, I won't be able to cope with what this high water stuff demands. And here is an island I passed on the way up to Gann this morning. I am happy to report this island, which probably shouldn't have been built on anyhow, has risen out of the water. The island is rising. Now, downriver on the Canadian Channel, not only do they have a water level problem, but they get big waves from the tour boats. So not uncommon to see a former Canadian Coast Guard cutter captain, you've seen his boat go through here a lot, he just retired a couple of years ago, putting up signs. So he gets these big waves, and you just can't use the boat dock. Lake Ontario has gotten so much worse. And I really feel for you guys. We're fortunate that we don't get battered every time the winds come up. Yeah, we get beat up a little bit, but nothing like Lake Ontario. So we've got something to be grateful for, but that doesn't mean we don't fight the same problem. Okay, can all bloodletting, can all future flood for the river and lake be prevented? No. It's just not possible. There was a really big flood in 1973 under Plan 1958 DD. So groups that are saying, let's go back to the old plan, that's not such a good idea either because of the full lakes and the weather conditions. So there's much flooding that can be mitigated. We can do something about. Probably handling the water levels right, there would have been a foot less at our peak this summer, maybe a 1.3, 1.5. We don't need to argue those details. Get the idea, it could be less. So how can we reduce the severity? What can we expect? Who's responsible? These were the questions everybody at our annual breakfast meeting, shore breakfast over in the Playhouse, was talking about. So the TIA president established the Water Levels Committee to answer just that. What should TIA tell its membership? We had to figure that out. Community at large, legislators, what should we say to the IJC? Could we make an educational difference by sharing our findings and encourage an open dialogue? Well, guess what? This is it. This is the beginning, and it will continue. After some deep diving, the committee came up with facts. We pulled together a 16-page working draft report and analyzed the 10-question survey that Dan spoke of earlier. That was very useful because I didn't think our members would be that much behind what we're doing. But it turns out we were behind the curveball. We had to go catch up because they wanted more from us. So we wrote an article, which is the basis of this talk for today. It's going to be in the coming TIA newsletter. It's already been posted on the River Talk. How many folks get River Talk here? This is the human version of River Talk. There's the E version and then the us version. So, good. Anybody who's a member or even wants to just give us their email address, we'll send it to you monthly. Okay, what did we find? We found that Plan 2014 did not cause the 2017 or 19 flooding because the IJC has no control over the water supplies nor the Ottawa River. You've heard from Sarah the perfect storm. What we're doing here is the military way of teaching. You tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell it to them, and then you tell them what you told them. I need even more times just to get all this stuff in my head. So this will fit very nicely with what Sarah has introduced to us. So it didn't cause it, but its imperfections made the peak levels higher and last longer than necessary. Everybody got that? That's a safe statement. And it made us less able to cope with the uncontrollable weather and supply changes. You know, I watch curves every day, and oh my gosh, we need to change the valve. Can't do it. It's not in the laws. So Plan 2014 likely made the flooding worse in the lake and the St. Lawrence River. How much is an open question? And it doesn't matter. We can make it better. We can react to it better. So that's where I'm going. Now this is similar to the situation at Boeing. How many of you guys have heard of the MAX 737? Yeah, and it crashed? Okay. Well, they've had it crash twice because of a software control problem. It's grounded and they're frantically fixing it. Plan 2014 crashed in its first 30 months, right after 2017 when it was introduced. It too needs to be taken offline immediately until flows causing damage imbalance to shoreline stakeholders can be corrected. Flows and flaws need to be corrected. We'll talk about what offline means in the suggestions portion of the talk. So the biggest difference between these two software problems, Boeing and the IJC, is ownership and action. Boeing has publicly acknowledged and discussed their flaws, while the IJC has not. Boeing's motivated to get the 737 MAX back flying. And the IJC continues, flying with no apparent open dialogue or an active process to fix things. So they need to identify, discuss, remove, or improve the serious risks inherent in continuing to have Plan 2014 control our lives. The IJC has little or no transparency or trust. Reminds me of my favorite movie, Pay No Attention to the Man Behind the Curtain. The great Oz has spoken, as Oz stands here with his hand on the crank. This is how the valve's controlled. It's taken me a long time to understand what's inside the plan. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But we've got to get rid of the whole Wizard of Oz thing. Why am I worried? As I said, I'm a control systems engineer. This is my 64th season on this river. And I can see the plan's strengths and weaknesses. And there are strengths too, undoubtedly. And, you know, they're the kind of peaks and changes that happen. That's the graph I watch. I watch it daily, and I record them every week. But 2020 is coming. The Great Lakes are full, as Sarah's pointed out. They're locked and loaded and ready to do it again. So let's not get distracted by the lakes, except it's coming. Why aren't the flaws being fixed? There's a lot of reasons. We're in gridlock. I mean, are changes being made today? No, I don't know what's going on, what's being improved. The give and take among stakeholders that happened during the initial Seaway era, starting in 1958, they're gone. There isn't give and take anymore. Damages are grossly out of balance. Montreal Harbor and the shipping interests seem to hold all the high cards. And the upstream riparians, shoreline folks, businesses, municipalities, we've got poor hands. 2s, 3s, 5s, and 7s, big deal. Did you know that all IJC commissioners must agree to change anything? Unanimity is required. One vote can literally block everything. Somebody makes a proposal. Let's turn the valve early. Everybody but one. I don't want it changed. Inaction, nothing. The IJC has full authority most of the time to do some of the things that actually logically make sense. But they're not accountable for their actions, and often they don't act because one vote. So there's a serious governance problems in the IJC. They call these times where the board can act deviations. So we want them to become deviates in the nicest form of the word. Change things when you need to. And fix what you're changing. So the unanimity requirement is a curse for us. Okay, I love this slide. This really says it to me. It's time to discuss the proverbial elephant in the room. I listen, the IJC has wonderful information. They're very helpful. They share that with us as we request it. But I can't get a straight story from them. And that's really sad. They keep not talking about the things that are important. I'm a controls guy. No control system I've ever designed worked the first time. You've got to improve it. You've got to alter it. You'll learn from watching how the system operates. And you say, oh, we were too late starting this. And, oh, that didn't stop. And we burned too many of whatever, you know. And you go back and change things. That hasn't been done. There's a long process for doing that. We don't have the time for a long process. So we need an open dialogue. The IJC has listened to some of the talks on Sarah's website. Some of her e-learning talks. Bernie's gives a great talk. He went up and talked to them before he did a webinar that a lot of us watched on September 11th. They're listening, but we got politics involved, human emotions, the list goes on. Okay. What Cuomo said, the new normal. I am not prepared to accept that at all. We cannot allow disastrous flooding to be the new normal. Agreed? Agreed. Somebody doesn't have to agree, and we can still make that statement that we all agreed. Okay, here's my favorite line for today. Riparians don't want to become riparians, except for Riparian Plan 2014. All in favor? There you go. All right. So what needs to happen? Well, 3 areas. On the U.S. government side, did you know that the IJC is being investigated in Washington, D.C. by the General Accountability Office? Yeah. Did you know that TIA is one of the groups that was interviewed in a 2-hour phone interview? That's part of what we've been doing. Did you know that I have plants on my back deck that didn't get in Ithaca last night for the freeze?
Oh, come on.
Can I get reimbursed for the plants that I lost last night too? Okay. So on the binational side, the U.S. State Department and the Canadian, I believe, Privy Council, we need them working together to take the heat off the IJC, to provide legal authority for, as far as I'm concerned, we put the plan on hold. We put it into emergency permanent deviation. You know, run it by Plan 2014 and make adjustments all over the place because you've got a responsibility. We may need the countries to actually do something. If all else fails, I'm going to call Donald Trump and have him just withdraw from the treaty. That's a joke. Come on, guys. On the stakeholders side, we have to work together. You know, it's not us against shipping or us against the Montreal. We have to work together. We've got a shared problem. And it's got to end up win-win. The goal is a smooth running seaway system, so it's going to take willingness on everybody's parts. Drain the swamp, drain the lake. My favorite phrase, empty the bathtub. Sarah is talking about a glass of water. I look at that and I see scotch, so I can empty one of those real fast. In any case, what I want to see is a target of 244.3 feet for the lake. That's roughly a foot over chart datum. Leave a foot of water over the bottom level of the lake in. But that's it. We can't afford to have 1.2, 1.5, whatever, 1 foot over that. Because every foot that's in there during the winter is a foot that comes up here. So we prepare extra buffer space. We enable Ontario to better absorb nature's curveballs. We prepare for 2020 now in the fall. And all this has to happen. We've got to get the water out of here before just the beginning of January when the ice starts to form. Because when ice starts to form above Moses Sanders Dam, they have to cut the flows back or they'll have real big problems. Okay, I won't spend a whole lot of time here, but this is a really useful cross-section. Did you know 4 out of our 5 Great Lakes have their bottoms below sea level? How about that? 1,333 feet in Lake Superior? Anyhow, this is a big supply system. That's how I look at it. Here's Lake Ontario. Here's where the control is. Essentially, there's no control up here. Don't argue with me about the small amount on Lake Superior. But this is where all the control is. So what I'll do is just give you a few analogies, because I'm going to tell you again some of the things Sarah told you. Think of the water that comes from the Great Lakes as flowing in just this big, monstrous pipe, just dumps in mercilessly. There is no stop button. Flows into a basin, and oh, by the way, you get a little more from your local watershed. Well, in actuality, we don't have the kind of flow that down just outside of Ithaca is 48 feet taller than the drop on Niagara Falls. It's Taganic Falls that you saw. This is what water coming into Lake Ontario looks like. You're all familiar with Niagara Falls. So, at the top, there's a picture of Lake Ontario. I look at that as an engineer as the buffer storage tank, the big holding tank. And at the bottom is Moses Saunders Dam. I look at that as the outlet valve. How much do you open the valve to let the Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River storage system drain, let it leak? Now, this graph tells a lot. I got this free on Facebook. A guy posted it and says, use it, get it around, spread it around. Briefly, this is what's happened during the winter and summer 2017, 18, and 19. The most important thing is the big smile on here. This is the 100-year average. So, at the end of the year, right here, the 100-year average is way down low here. In 2017 and 2019, our levels were much above this 100-year average. That's that 1 foot, 1.5 foot, some call it 15 inches. This is the available free space we need taken out of Lake Ontario. This is what water levels did the day that Plan 2014 started. Straight up. And you know what 2017 looked like. They were doing great lowering the water last year, and then all of a sudden November got really, really wet. November, December. And look where the water went. It didn't stay on the average down here. It just started climbing. The point is made is that we need to actually start right in here running below the 100-year average to build that buffer every year as an insurance policy. And then if we're not getting a lot of rain, let some more. Stop letting water out. So it's always a constant balancing game. Okay, I stole 2 slides from the IJC. Actually, I stole 3. I stole the introduction. It says the Thousand Islands Association shows one of our markers. I stole that from the IJC. I think we gave it to them. In any case, the Iroquois Dam feeds Moses Saunders. That's the valve. And then there's another smaller dam downstream, and then Montreal. So what happens is if we want to decrease the level of Lake Ontario by 1 centimeter, okay, it takes a week of flows to do that. The flow goes up on the left, going, you can barely see that. I can see it better here. Look at my screen. Yeah. The flows go up coming into the left-hand dam, Iroquois, and the water will raise in front of the dam 15 centimeters. Excuse me, it will go down 15. It'll drop because we're letting more out. Oh, and I backed up. Okay. Anyhow, now we're trying to sync the presentation also with the video. I shouldn't have done that. Anyhow, just an example. Vince Martin, who works with me in water levels, says, Ken, remember 810 cubic meters per second. It's a good number because if you do that for a week, Lake Ontario will go down 1 inch. What I showed you on the previous slide was as that centimeter got dropped in Lake Ontario, the levels going into Montreal went up 11 to 12 centimeters. That's this teeter-totter that happens. Yeah, we go to drain, they get full. Does this. So if we add 810 for a week, we will basically maybe lower the lake level 1.5 inches. I won't spend time on the numbers here. It's just little math, but it's very, very slow. Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River do not flush like a toilet. Get the water out. Okay, spend your summer watching the water go down slowly. And their best efforts aren't going to drop it very fast. So that's the point. Okay, to update and improve Plan 2014 is an extremely complex problem. It's made my head hurt a lot. There's no quick fixes, but these are ordinary, extraordinary times. And we need to adopt a selfless spirit of working together. That's going to take a miracle. So to me, the goal is to stabilize the Seaway water system with balanced pain and protection and opportunity for all interests for 2020. That's my near-term goal. And any of these goals, any of these ideas we have, you can steal them and use them, or you can help us correct them or improve them. Ball's in your court. Near-term action steps that I'm proposing is we need to declare the Lake River system to be in deviation. We need to suspend the unanimity rule and have the IJC publish all motions and all voting records. Is there just one party that is the no vote 90% of the time? Oh, they work in shipping. Oh, okay, or something like that. I'm not blaming shipping at all. But selfish self-centeredness is the core of our problems here. Sarah talked about F limits and L limits. When the high water goes up, I think of the S limit. Ah, shit. Yeah. Anyhow, I won't spend a lot of time here, but technically I want to see the control system improved. Add 2 to 3 tiers of curves for Montreal's F limit. How you act and the timing that you act on. It's not just wait until it gets to here and then suck it up, you keep your water and we'll be happy. No, straight lines are not the ways to control most things. So, and then balance this shared pain between the lake area and Montreal. Allow Lake St. Louis limits maybe a little above this magic level that it never really goes above unless the Ottawa River floods them. So those are ways to improve the control system and make it more balanced. L limits, which is the shipping limits, they're now at 200 cubic meters per second. Try 300 or 400 over top of what, there's a curve that allows that. As lake level goes down, the flows out have to go down or the ships can't steer. Well, there's data that back in 1986, they dumped a lot more water out of the same Great Lakes, St. Lawrence River Seaway structure than they're doing now. And the shipping industry was fine with it. We need to go test those things. By the way, remember that 800 cubic meters per second? That will fill 3.5 Olympic swimming pools per second. That's how much water we're talking about. That's what I get for working with Vince Barton. He thinks like that. Puts it in human terms for me. And I want to institute patterning, which is high flows, a couple of days a week, let the ships anchor, and then cut the flows back down. That is a demand that was stated this week. They sent it to the IJC from Save the River during the summer, and it was ignored. So they restated it. And I do want to pass along greetings from John Peach, the executive director of Save the River. He was very sorry he couldn't come here. He says, but I wasn't given adequate notice. Well, hell, neither were we. This thing just erupted in the last week. But he had plans with his grandkids today, and he really couldn't change them. And we all know the pecking order of priorities in family life. Grandkids first. In any case, he says he'd love to be here, and he is very much in support of us working together. He's really big on that. He thinks the patterning will help. He wants to see the adaptive management process used. So now we've got some longer term action steps. I want them to fast track the GLAM program. Now, it's not a GLAM program, but it's the Great Lakes Adaptive Management Program I just mentioned, and that John Peach mentioned when he and I talked a long time ago. So get that moving. Don't take 3 or 4 years and publish a big, fancy, expensive report. Get with it, dude. It's like the MAX 737. We need it back in the air. We're losing money. We're losing generations. So the Water Levels Committee looks at it this way. Let's increase the sophistication of Plan 2014, of the decision-making model, by immediately beginning the following action steps. Create a master understanding knowledge base and control diagram. You know, if this and this and this, then we do that. It's basic logic stuff. We engineers use that. But that's what's inside Plan 2014. Some of the assumptions, adjust the standard end of year level to something, they won't admit to that. They won't talk about it. You don't see that. It's just the way it ends up. Okay, so we want to know everything that the IJC and the International Lake Ontario St. Lawrence River Board, who actually control the knob for the IJC, what all the rules are. Dump all that out, and then create new options for the F limit, the L limits, and for Lake Ontario's fall, winter. In any case, add control loops also that recognize warning signs, like changes, stages, like, uh-oh, the water's starting to get high. Oh, the lakes are really full, and it's predicted to be really rainy for the next 30 days, and it's been rainy for the last 30. We better start now, because none of that's built into Plan 2014. And as Sarah made really clear, the IJC is actually hamstrung by their own plan. Okay, these are the 3 control loops. Number 1 is, what should the fall and winter level be for Lake Ontario and the St. Lawrence River? We need lowered control targets. We need principles for which making those decisions, and methods to do that. Those need to be developed. We need a new F-limit strategy, not a threshold of, either we got a problem or we don't for Ontario versus Montreal, but curves for the degree of pain, the degree of action that's needed for fairly balancing that shared pain, and yet protect both Montreal Harbor and Lake Ontario. And have different rules for exceptional supply conditions. Not normal supply, but exceptional supply. Add new L-limit decision-making methods and options, and enable more rapid lowering of Lake Ontario. And maybe do some of the shipping mitigations that they did in 2017. They hardly are doing anything different in 2019. Longer term, initiate studies to predict and track the water level and flow peaks and their durations, and then relate that to economic damage and benefit to all stakeholders. They have no idea, a cause and effect. They need to understand that if the damage is getting this bad on the shores, the levels are, the damage, here's the cost. There's no economic model for the cost of levels in the lake. There is a scientific study going on for the levels and environmental benefits. That's part of the plan to do that. They need to know about the rest of the cause-effect relationships. Know that exceptional circumstances may require drastic actions. These are things to accept longer term. Know that no human plan will be perfect, guaranteeing the prevention of Lake Ontario and river flooding, Montreal flooding, shipping stoppage, hydroelectric output lowering, environmental high and low swings reduction, and a possible need for some major construction modifications to the seaway. It ain't perfect. Remember the ongoing need to work together to mitigate disasters in a balanced method for all stakeholders. You see, the stakeholders that are holding all the cards, they're not worried. IJC is politically covering their butt because they promoted and adopted this plan and negotiated it. They don't want to talk about it. We're screaming. You know, how many people got athlete's foot from walking on water this summer on their docks? I didn't wear socks all summer. Oh, me. And develop a list of dredging and new construction options to alleviate water flow control limitations in the seaway and initiate some separate studies if that makes sense. Yeah, they tried cranking it up 400 cubic meters per second higher than the max level of 10.4 we hit this summer. They tried that. They couldn't keep water levels up in Lake St. Louis. There is a flow limiter. There's a shallow area and you can't dump as much water out of the river without making parts of the seaway far too shallow. You can't just suck water out of the lake. So some dredging is needed to be able to take it out as fast as they can let it out.
Ken, if you don't wrap this up, nobody will get to ask a question.
Good.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. Okay, so we need to encourage authorization by our governments to let these guys go to work. And I have, by the way, at the end, a message from our president. He says you can't negotiate if you can't say no for equal bargaining. So what TIA has done is we're supporting initiatives of growing groups of shoreline municipalities, businesses, environment, and riparian stakeholders, organizing to send a message to our governments, voters, regulators that Plan 2014 needs an immediate fix. As Peter said, otherwise we will be flying into 2020 with a significant chance of another crash. Okay, we want your support, ideas. Now comes the question and answer dialogue. Or if you've got ideas, you can email us afterwards. You can contact me. There's my email. I'll leave that up. We got a Facebook page. Please fill out the IJC survey. Write letters of support for patterning now. And keep checking our Facebook page for action updates. Thank you very much.